Welcome to the HRLocker podcast. In today's episode, we talk to JJ Caffey, an MBA graduate from the Wharton School of Business, tech entrepreneur and community builder. JJ is based in Silicon Valley in San Francisco and is the founder and CEO of Order-In, a digital platform for leaders of remote work. She specialises on the topics of productivity and wellbeing and has a strong background in company culture. Our podcast host today is Crystel Rynne, Head of Product Marketing at HRLocker, and she asked JJ about the issues of managing remote teams and how creating the right company culture can help build excellent work-from-home policies.
JJ, could you tell our listeners a little bit about your background, your interest in remote working, and how you came up with the idea of Order-In?
Hi, Crystal. Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I think that first and foremost, I have been interested in entrepreneurship for a long time. It's been a bit of a path for me, certainly. I think the most exciting leap I took into the type of work I'm doing now was when I was the first employee of a startup software company. And I was with them as they grew from, pre-seed and really bootstrapping just me and the founders through their Series A. From there, I went to Wharton, as you knew, and then from there, I've been looking to solve this problem that I myself have experienced quite frequently over the kind of entrepreneurial work that I've done in the past year, and then even prior to that. I was working out of a lot of co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators, really kind of informal office environments where we often worked remote for part of the week for some of the time, or otherwise in these less formal offices. So I always kind of had my eye out on what could have been improved about those environments for people like me. And then particularly after I graduated and I was working from home myself most of the time, completely alone usually, Crystal, honestly, I was working cross-legged on my couch in like the same little spot on my couch most of the time. I started thinking about, not just from all the data we amassed, but from my own experience as well, kind of the biggest issues facing people who are either working with team members who are far flung across the world, or even just a very common experience I had in the startup world of team members who I might see once a week, every couple weeks, and thinking about, okay, how do we keep our connections alive with these other people, and how do we make life a little bit less, I guess, unstructured and strange of just sitting on my couch all day, wandering to the fridge sometimes and never seeing another human face. So I actually started this company hoping that it would become an office space company with physical locations. And then we started pivoting to digital around the beginning of the year. And of course, when COVID-19 struck, it really changed everything for us in terms of, okay, how can we take the problems we were already looking to solve and address them purely remotely and purely digitally? And I think I've been very fortunate that people have been connecting with what we've been building and that we've had a chance to learn so much. So I'm hoping it'll be useful to your
That's great.
to your listeners.
I think we've gone to the second half of the beginning, if that makes sense, and that
I hope
people
so.
were sent home a couple of months ago, and all this remote working started, and people had no idea what they were supposed to do, and companies kind of hustled together a couple of policies and a couple of work from home policies, which they kind of was like a sticky tape to get them through this time. And certainly here we don't. The end is not in sight in terms of remote working. It's certainly going to be continuing for the next few months, and even I do think that for most companies who never had remote working, it is going to stay with them, and that some people are going to continue doing 2 or 3 days from home if it's not full-time remote working. So, I mean, what do you think would be, through your time working either as a remote worker yourself, but also working with companies who are implementing remote working? What do you think are the biggest challenges that companies face when trying to put in policies in place for remote workers?
Absolutely. So I think there are 2 really serious pain points that drove me to start Order-In. And these pain points are more on the sides of the individuals experiencing remote work, but I promise I'll draw it back to the challenges with company policies as well, because I think it forms the core of the challenge here. The first one is burnout. Is feeling this kind of sense of overwhelm and lack of structure in your day. And I'm sure you can immediately think of, okay, hear the implications for managers and for companies trying to put these policies in place. It's this discomfort that we all feel. I know I feel it even though I manage myself. And then sometimes with my own team, we're a small company, but we have, 6-8 people depending on at the moment. And this discomfort that you feel of not being in the same room with the people you're managing in terms of not knowing how they should be using their time, how they are using their time, what are they doing all day? And I know that there's a worry on the managerial side about that. And from the employee side as well, of managing your time. And we've seen the workday get much longer. I have different sources here, but it looks like an average of 10 to 15% longer in the workday, maybe 2 to 3 hours longer, depending on what you read. So that's really the one of the two big pain points that I see is this kind of lack of structure. That leads to people working longer hours, not achieving more during those longer hours, but just feeling very stressed and feeling burned out. And then the second one is, it seems maybe emotional or touchy-feely, but it has huge business implications. And it's just a little bit of disconnectedness, loneliness, social isolation. The beautiful moments that we get to share with our colleagues that I think we all took for granted when we weren't remote, of just getting to make eye contact with someone in a funny moment, and laugh.
Yeah, definitely. Just having a cup of coffee with somebody.
Yeah. And I can have a Zoom coffee with you. It takes some doing, right? But we could do it. But when I'm in a call with, 6 of my employees, I don't know who I'm making eye contact with at any moment in that conversation. So it's these little things that we lose. And then, of course, just for people being stuck in the house, they lose so much of that feeling of being out in the world and having small interactions with people or forming deeper relationships. And I think that that's a huge challenge to organizations in building culture as well. And we've been working on that a lot at Order In. We built a membership club, as you mentioned, for people to come together and form these deeper bonds. And it's very exciting. We're looking at how we can start to scale that and offer it to enterprises as well to help address these issues. But I think those are the big two. It's that burnout and the loneliness.
Yeah. I think definitely I can even see it when the kind of the first couple of weeks that we were at home 100%. You kind of tend to work all day because you're not sure, have you actually, you're not sitting at your desk from 9 to 5:30. So I definitely think that's something employers need to be aware of, that just because people are clocking in the hours. Too? Well, it does, but I'll tell you the couple of things that I learned is that you have to put a structure in your day, even if you're not going to the office. So that's a self-discipline that either as a company they need to teach you how to do, or you need to embrace that yourself if you're going to continue remote working, because it's just not healthy otherwise.
It's true. It can be tough. The best advice I got about it was as a founder before I was ever working remotely and long before COVID. It was actually when I was a employee of a different startup, even before the one I mentioned, and I did work from home sometimes. And it was the advice to founders to have a quitting time. This is your time at the end of the day. You have to be done. You have to close your computer. And I think that regardless of whether you're managing a team or you're on a team or you're an entrepreneur yourself, you're already at your house. You have your laptop open. It would be so easy to do one more thing, 2 more things. And for me, my biggest challenge is actually closing the computer, shutting the door, and walking away.
And that for me as well. And like I would say that what I try to do is bring it. Now I have a dedicated office, and that I close the door.
I do too. It took some doing. We just moved in here a couple weeks ago, and now I can close the door. It's amazing. But we do have to be aware. My own team, for instance, we're largely Gen Z, and people live at home with their families. Or they may be in smaller apartments. Not everyone has the luxury of dedicating a room of where they're living and shutting that door. So I have to try to keep that awareness of other ways of helping them out with the structure of their days.
We've always had remote workers, pre-COVID. Who knows what that was like? But we've always had remote workers, and so we've always had that kind of element involved in all the teams that we have, that somebody would always usually be remote working. And one of the things that we found was really important is that you have to have a strong company culture to be able to facilitate that working from home. And I think for us the kind of key element was we have one of our core competencies is trust and truth, in that just because you're working from home and I don't see you I know you're doing a good job. I don't actually have to see you. Because I do think that would be one of the main, and I don't know, do you agree? One of the main obstacles for companies is that they're like, well, I don't know what that person's doing at home, and I want them to be in the office. So do you think company culture, do you think you have to have a certain type of company culture, or, what do you think is, from a company perspective in terms of culture, is most important that remote working is going to succeed? It was a really roundabout question.
Yeah, no, of course, I understand. I could not agree more strongly with your take, and the research, the data has played this out, even since articles I found from 2018 when we were researching this. So I think that you've really hit it on the head. I love your hashtag. Actually, I saw that work. That work is not a place. Work is an activity.
Yeah.
And the order in. It's a bit of an aside, but our roadmap includes work from anywhere, support, and work from nature down the road. It's something I believe in so strongly. And I think you hit the nail on the head that it's all about trust with your team to build culture. And I think the other thing is, I don't know, I wish I had a easy word to encapsulate this, but leadership might be it, but that sounds so cheesy. But trying to put yourself in the shoes of the people you're managing and think about, how can I be of service to my team as a manager? What do they really need? And I'll give a couple of examples. In that culture building that we've tried to do, I'm quite proud of this, actually. I don't know if they're going to be fully honest in our own anonymous internal surveys, but with members and with our own teams, we've asked them questions like, do you feel like you have someone who's part of this who's a friend? And people say, yes, I didn't ever meet these people until 3 months ago. I've never met them in person, and I consider someone on this team a friend. I have people on this team who I feel like I could reach out to for help. These kind of things that I think are so important. So it's a little bit silly maybe, but it's really important to us, and it's talking every day. I do check in with my whole team every day. I come from a tech background where we were in an agile environment. I'm not sure if you guys run agile or do Scrum or anything like that.
Yeah, we love agile and Scrum.
We're not a software company or anything like that, but we do have a daily stand-up, and I think though, and I try to think about this from a human point of view, where I've always cared about being disciplined, and I used to have my reputation I was very proud of, JJ's the executive whose meetings end on time or they end early. And now it's a different type of discipline. It's about creating space for people to be human beings and genuinely connect. And it was a difficult transition for me to let those meetings that were typically these 15-minute stand-ups that were very on point become a little bit more vague, a little bit more chatty and personal, but it is our chance that everyone knows they can rely on to actually just catch up with each other. And I encourage people to chit chat and tell each other about their weekends a little bit. I think another one that can help in a similar vein and that I've seen managers struggle with is making sure that people on the teams and within the company connect to each other. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think about this and what you've done, because I think sometimes it can be too easy for me as a manager to have check-ins with my team members individually, or maybe a group meeting, but does person A and person B have any opportunity to talk to each other the way that they might normally just in the kitchen at the office?
Yeah, and they just bump into each other and, at the water cooler time, you're just having a cup of coffee or something, But there's two things I really want, you're the first person I've met who totally understands that Scrum is not only for tech. Because we have brought in the stand up for every department that we have. So in terms of sales, marketing, and even finance, because I think that especially when you're remote working, that 15-minute meeting in the morning time to get everybody on the call, just to check in, just make sure everybody's okay, that they don't have an issue.
I think it's more important than ever. I think anyone could benefit from that right now.
Yeah, and again, like you said, we're not on the phone for 2 hours. We're on the phone for 15 minutes, and we're just making sure everything's okay. So, but definitely, I think that we have an open door policy, which is that now obviously we don't have doors anymore. It's kind of through Microsoft Teams now, but
an open Zoom policy.
Yeah, exactly. And that even if new people are starting, that you should engage with everybody. So send a message to somebody, send a message to, even if it's a senior manager or the CEO, make sure you're connecting on some level, because I do think you're right. JJ, is that I have found it really important to check in with my team throughout the day, and I'm checking in with them personally. But presumably I'm not the only person they want to speak to. So so it is
Right.
important that you're widening the circle, and that I love that what you said, that they have friends in the team, regardless of if they're sitting
Yeah.
with them in the office.
Yeah.
And that's really important. So we've done a couple of things, like, we've done those, the Zoom drinks and Zoom yoga and whatever. But I actually think what's worked the best for us is the open Zoom policy, in that if you have an issue, make sure that you don't have to go through me to talk to somebody else. Make sure that you're connecting with them on a one-to-one basis.
Absolutely. And I do it systematically. Again, it's almost strange for me to admit this because I've always been so disciplined about meetings, and I'm sensitive about not wanting to add another meeting to people's calendars if it's not necessary, especially in this context of knowing that the workday is getting longer. But when someone's starting a new project, I will ask them to have a one-on-one individually with everyone else on the team. And we're a small team. Again, this is not maybe every single person, if it's completely unrelated, but maybe 6 or 7 people with these short conversations. And normally I would think that's a terrible use of everyone's time. I shouldn't necessarily be doing that, but in their little half-hour check-ins, maybe it's theoretically about this new project, but again, they're checking in as human beings, and they're forming relationships that if I didn't tell them to go do it, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would think, I have so many deliverables, I'm not going to go do this. And so it's a bit of an excuse to get people to brainstorm with each other, to make sure that they're sharing and getting the information that they need without putting the burden again on them as employees. I'm taking on the burden. If anyone's going to be annoyed that there's an extra meeting on their calendar, it's coming from me, rather than putting someone in a position where they have to go, knock, knock, sorry to bother you. Can you talk to me? And trying to pave the way for that. I think I wanted to just say a couple more words on what you said about trust, which I think is so crucial, that we've seen so much evidence that the best way to manage remotely is by empowering your employees, by trusting them, by making sure that they know that they want to do a good job. Because I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to do a terrible job at my job today.
Exactly. I'm just going to log on and not do anything today.
Right. Like no one wants to do poorly. So I think in those rare cases when you are having more trouble, what I've seen, having spoken to so many managers and reviewed the data and experimented with it, our own members, is to say, okay, let's make sure this person understands the impact of what they're doing on the broader organization. Help them understand why it's important that we meet these goals and how important their work is and why we care. If you can't answer that for yourself, then maybe you need to think again, while you're managing, like, oh, does this even need to happen? But I think that the worst path I see managers going down, and there are just a wealth of really horrible software programs to enable this, is sort of trying to monitor.
We had a client ask us for take a picture of an employee's screen every couple of seconds. And I was like, we just don't do that.
Yeah, that's out there. Things that can track on their personal computers too, which I think is just an extra level of sort of inconsiderate, because they're at home with their personal computers now. Some companies have given their work computers out as well, which is better, but still. That it'll watch them through a camera, take a picture of the person to make sure they're really sitting there, track everything they type or every website they visit.
And I think you're losing straight away if you're doing that.
Absolutely.
Personally.
And the data has shown directly that people will spend more time trying to circumvent the software. I mean, people are smart. They can figure out how to get around these things. They'll put their energy, their creativity, and their motivation to not being spied on anymore instead of towards the actual work. And I think that when you manage remotely, you have to evaluate whether people are doing well or not based on their goals. Are they meeting their goals, not what you think they're doing at 10 a.m. or at noon.
Yeah, and I think that's key, is that I think we need to get past the point of that the person is just clocking in from 9 to 5:30 and actually, well, this was the goal and they've achieved it. So it's the productivity part of it, rather it's the outcome, not that they've just clocked in.
And it has to be outcome oriented. Absolutely. So too, you just can't stare at people all day. It's not possible anymore.
I think as well, what kind of you have to think about what kind of company you want to build. And I think the future where we need to get to is that we're focusing on the goal and the productivity rather than that somebody's just clocked in from 9 to 5:30. Personally.
Absolutely.
remote working has been a topic that we've spoken about a lot, and especially I suppose because we had been remote working for so long, a lot of our clients have kind of come to us about how do you guys do it, or what what are you doing, and it was something that we've always done. Certainly, we've never been 100% remote, and I would definitely agree with you that I miss having a cup of coffee face to face with somebody, or having a chat with 2 or 3 people. I recently read an article in the Harvard Business Review about kind of how the pandemic is going to affect the economy and the industry going forward. And one of the things was that the role of HR is going to change in a company. And what is the future work going to look like in the next 4 to 5 years? There's a huge loaded question for you.
It is. It sure is. Well, I loved that piece. It was so futuristic in some of the jobs that they came up with. Genetic counseling in HR and all kinds of very interesting, automation to human coordinator and these fantastic roles. So I love this question actually, because it goes back to, do you remember, last year when we talked about the future of work, when that came up, people didn't mean remote work. Now people
they meant
really
AI. That's what
they meant AI.
about.
Right. The future of work. We were talking about AI.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm actually writing a piece about this currently, that we sort of shouldn't forget about about AI. All of the AI companies, of course, are not forgetting about themselves. And I'll tell you, I work with investors through another company of mine, Venture Foragers. It's a venture capital research firm. Investors certainly are not forgetting about AI. So that's really a question of automation, I think. And I've always felt that it could go one of 2 directions. It could go the really kind of concerning, terrible Blade Runner, the Matrix direction that we don't want it to go in, or it could go in a really beautiful, like Star Trek direction. I know 5 years is not 100 years, but so when it comes to automation, I think that we could either have our worst fears come true, which is that there's a scarcity of jobs because so many things are being automated, and then people are competing for what's left. And so to be competitive, you have to be doing these terrible hours, and it could depress income and wages and pay. I mean, there's some serious concerns on that front, and speaks a lot to what I care about and what I'm working on right now. You cannot replace human connection between a person and another person. You cannot replace it, and human beings cannot do without it. So the future that I would like to see, instead of this, sort of terrible, everything's automated, and a something we could see in the next 5 years, because we already see it in Amazon warehouses, is having a computer as your boss, basically, is having an algorithm have the power to fire you based on your observed work performance. I mean, some really kind of ugly things that people innately find unfair and inhumane. What I would like to see happen instead is if we could really leverage automation to increase productivity by getting rid of all of the boring, repetitive stuff that people don't want to do. And that's my favorite use case for automation across the board, across industries that I've seen. Just the stuff I don't like doing, fix that with AI. And then let people focus on what people can never be replaced in, and what we find most fulfilling. I mean, research on happiness and fulfillment, which is connecting with other people. I think that all of these kind of jobs that HBS was predicting, they have this element of human beings seeing and understanding and taking care of other human beings in the context of these tools and using these tools. And you can't replace a person for that, and we shouldn't. So I would love to see a future where most of our jobs involve that kind of interpersonal aspect. And maybe we all have shorter work days because we're getting more done because we've automated some of the time-consuming parts. Right. I mean, there's no reason we shouldn't see a 3 or 4 day work week. There's no reason we shouldn't see shorter work days, because the economic prosperity that we can create by leveraging these efficiencies of, I'm sorry, that sounded so Wharton MBA. I'm sorry, by leveraging efficiencies. But you know what I'm saying, by making things faster and easier. And
so
then
we can benefit from it, That's
absolutely, and then let people focus on taking care of each other as humans in their roles, whether that's in an HR capacity, a managerial capacity, maybe customer success. I mean, some of these things that I think it's so lovely to have that human touch.
Yeah, I mean, even I think the differences for me in the last couple of months of being at home full time. So I have 3 small kids. Is that we certainly have taken a step back in that usually, I'd be racing to work and then I'm racing home to pick a child up to bring them to some after school thing that they're doing. So it's 5 days a week. And then I've got to race home to finish the work that I didn't get, that I had to leave early because I had to quickly. So, and your whole day is racing so fast.
Absolutely.
So I do hope one of the things maybe that we've gotten from the pandemic is that we don't have to be racing so much, that we can be a little bit, we can be a little bit calmer sometimes.
I would love to see that. And I think the flexibility too.
Exactly. Totally agree.
I think that's the number one thing. So we looked at, do people like working from home, is a question that I ask myself, that I get, because we have data that people are lonely, anxious, burned out, and then we have data that they want to keep doing it. And that was very interesting for me to look at. Okay, there's something in this that makes it worth it, the downsides that they dislike and that I hope that Order In we can help to solve. But people still want to do it, and it's for the flexibility. I think work could absolutely look like something you do on your own schedule when it works for you. It doesn't matter to your colleagues because they're in Ireland and San Francisco, let's say.
Exactly.
So they don't care. I'm asleep. You're doing whatever you want.
But I definitely think that there's a lot of challenges when you're working from home, but you kind of need to embrace them and figure them out how you're going to do that. And companies have to be flexible for you to do that, I think is the key. So thank you so much, JJ. I really hope that people have got a lot from this today. I certainly have, and I really enjoyed chatting to you. If people want to get in contact with you, what is the best way?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at JJ Caffey, and Order In, you can find out more about us at orderinclub.com or Order In Club on any social media.
If anybody wants to get in contact with JJ, I'd highly recommend it. And thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon, JJ.
Thank you. Bye-bye.